What's up, everybody? Jensen Cummings here. Thank you, as always, for tuning in. Today's Best Served Podcast 229. We are talking cooks leaving the industry. This is a part of Best Served Tableside Volume 1, Leaving the Industry, Episode 1. And Best Served Tableside is really an industry roundtable to talk shop on our personal experiences, our professional experiences, what it takes to navigate this crazy industry. And in this case, why we had to leave this industry. And so I have three guests with us today, all industry pros. We're going to be talking about kind of their personal journeys, the reasons for them that they fell in love with this industry, the reason that they had to leave this industry, and what we could have done and need to do into the future to retain the most talented and passionate people, something that is the bedrock of our industry that is clearly has always been vulnerable and potentially is more vulnerable than ever in this time, being exposed by COVID-19. I'm gonna let each of my guests kind of introduce themselves just a little bit, tell them kind of their background in the industry. I want to start with Stephanie Kenyon here. Stephanie, for you, tell us kind of how long were you in the industry, maybe where at, and kind of maybe a couple stops along your journey.
Yeah, absolutely. So I have been in the industry for 12 years, mostly working as cook and chef. I did most of my cooking and chef career in Denver. Actually, I'm in Portland now. And I spent a lot of time at Beast and Bottle. I was there for 3 years as their executive sous chef. And previous to that, I was line cooking at Rioja as well.
Okay. And so then you're give me an idea. When did you actually then start the transition of leaving the industry?
It was about 3 years ago that I kind of started phasing myself out. I've also done some serving in the meantime, but it's all losses cut at this point.
Understood. All right, Matt, I want to bring you in to discuss your kind of journey here. Again, how long in the industry, kind of where, and maybe a spot or two where you kind of cut your teeth.
Yeah. I'm born and raised in Colorado. I came to Denver a little over 12 years ago for Johnson & Wales University. I've been in the industry about 20 years. I started when I was 13 as a dishwasher and prep cook, and kind of worked my way through high school, couple different restaurants. I started fine dining at the Broadmoor Hotel down here in the Springs. And after that, I kind of worked a few places in Denver, did catering, spent about 5 years working for Frank Bonanno as the exec at Osteria Marco, and just started getting out March when everyone else kind of was forced out.
Yeah, I think this is the vulnerability that we discussed being exposed in this moment for restaurants. And so a lot of people we hear now, this was the catalyst. I think it's interesting. It's been building for a while, yet we didn't feel like the opportunity was there. We didn't know what else to do. And this kind of forced our hand a little bit. And so again, this is what we want to highlight and make sure people understand what's happening for the individuals in this industry. All right, Bo Ratliff, we're going to bring you in. Give us same question. Kind of a little bit of your background in the industry.
So I've been in the industry for about 16 years. It's basically all I've ever done. I moved out to Denver in 2008 to go to Johnson & Wales. And I kind of cut my teeth at Vesta, ended up at Lola, and really just have been, ingraining myself in this scene the entire time, learning as much as I can, and falling in love with food and everybody that works with it the entire time. So it's been a very humbling and very wonderful experience. And it's been half my life, literally. Half my life, so
I think we all have that experience. That's very interesting. Literally over my shoulder here is Beyond the Sauce, Vesta's cookbook, signed by Matt Selby, the one and only legend for sure. How perfect is that? That's a lot of experience going into kind of this industry, and I can see it on all of your faces. Like there is this profound sense of finding your tribe, your people when you get into a restaurant, and there's a profound sense of loss when you feel like you are no longer a part of that, or they're no longer a part of you, and it's a huge struggle that we need to reconcile with. And so I want to get into that a little bit. It's so important for us to understand why the fuck we got into this crazy industry. why we do what we do, why we get out of bed in the morning, which is probably more like 12:30 because you worked until 1:30 and then went out and made bad choices and all the things that we've done in this industry, and do it again and again and again, and have the passion for it and connect with the team, even though we're grinding and hustling and barely surviving so often, both emotionally, physically, and financially. But the why, if we have any chance of moving into the next phase beyond our adolescence in this industry, has to be why and who we serve versus just the food. The food it's amazing, but the food is just the food, and the people and the relationships and the motivation, that's what's timeless. And so I want to get to that. And so kind of starting back, Stephanie, for you, why did you get in this industry? Were you hooked right away? Give us like those early moments when you kind of first caught that hospitality bug.
Yeah. So I started working in restaurants when I was young as well, like, 14 years old, bussing tables. And I knew that I wanted to be a chef before I had even gotten the opportunity to do it. It was like, I had never even done this before, but I knew that it was something that I was just incredibly drawn to. There's this excitement, there's this rush, there's this pressure and stress, and this environment that just energizes you. And I think that's very enticing for a lot of people. And the community that is involved in restaurants is I think, we can all agree, it's unlike anything else. You meet the most incredible individuals, and you go through these really intense experiences together.
Yeah.
You find your craft, you struggle, you fuck up and make mistakes, and you learn and you grow together. And so I think that's a really binding experience of restaurants, and what really keeps people coming back over and over again is this sense of like camaraderie of this community that is really unique to the restaurant industry.
Yeah. And when I hear you speaking, one of the things that occurs to me too, as all of us got in very young, is you're in this very formative time in your life, just purely being young. And the fact that you don't go into investment banking when you're 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, you don't have that life journey where you're just figuring out your life full stop, let alone your professional life. And so
Right.
People are a part of your first this and your first that. And it very much harkens back to like they've been a part of your life in this fundamental time versus just being a part of the job. Because again, you can get in at such a young age. The barrier to entry is so low. We'll take everybody. You have the passion, you can hustle and grind and take a little bit of hazing, you're in. Doesn't matter where you came from, you're in. So I can appreciate that. Matt, for you, I think we're going to hear a little bit more, but I want to see maybe for you, anything personal for you of being very young and kind of finding your tribe. Talk about that experience for you a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I think I started out as a young kid just finding food and cooking so magical, forcing my parents to buy random weird ingredients, sesame oil and saffron threads, and they had no idea what I was doing, but it was so interesting to me. And then getting to a place where everyone else around you is just as excited about those new ingredients, those new dishes. That's just so fun to see that, and to geek out on food with people, and to be able to have a 4-hour conversation about ingredients or a region of the world. And I mean, not many people want to have those conversations, and it bores most people. So in order to find and to be able to find those people like that, it was a pretty magical experience. And I knew from an early age that, I belonged in restaurants. And I think the excitement of the rush was one of those things that if you can get through that with those people, like you're just friends with them no matter what. And that creates that bond that it's, I was never in the military, but from the stories I hear from my military friends, it's kind of the same thing. It's like you go to battle with these people, and, when you come out the other end, there's a connection unlike any other.
Yeah, you have gone through the fire, literally, and the success and the trauma is shared. And so there's something very galvanizing about that. I could not agree with that more. And it's interesting, too, because you mentioned the 4-hour conversation. When we started in this industry, we were still just getting out of being the help. And it was very strange because we were this counterculture, right? As Bourdain says, the pirates in the pirate ship, or you're the band of rebels, the island misfit toys, all of these things that I love to kind of bring up. And it wasn't until 2000, 2002, 3, 5 that where all of a sudden we became the cool kids. And part of the issue is like we didn't know how to handle that. We weren't quite sure how to all of a sudden people are like, you're a chef? I'm like, you goddamn right I'm a chef. And the next thing was, wow, that's really cool. Oh, I thought we were going to have to like defend our position as not being somebody who works in a cubicle, getting a real job. And so that was an interesting thing. And I think part of the struggle is we have been in our adolescence in this industry for 20 years, and you do dumb stuff and you figure things out and you try a bunch of things and you find your people and you burn bridges, all the things you do when you're adolescent. It just took 20 years in this industry. And now we're having to reconcile with the ramifications of that. And that's part of what's playing out. So I appreciate that. Bo, for you, kind of same thing. Was there anything nuanced for you when you found your way in this industry that you thought was really compelling that has kept you in this industry for kind of this long before you had to kind of
actually, Stephanie and Matt both actually have great points. And obviously that's part of it. Having that sense of camaraderie, having that sense of, teamwork and getting a sense of accomplishment, I guess. But for me, what it really kind of solidified it was it's kind of like alchemy. Like cooking has infinite ingredients. There's no limit to what you can do. So it's not like you're ever really going to get tired of this. You know what I mean? Like it's something that's just so magical about it. Like almost Harry Potter-esque. You know what I mean? Like it's so cool and it's so much fun. And there's nothing quite like making something and giving it to someone and watching them smile after they take their first taste. And you could have the shittiest day of your life and go into a restaurant and sit down and take one bite of something, and it will change your entire day. And seeing that happen is just like, nobody thanks the cooks. Nobody ever thanks the cooks. They thank the server. They don't thank the cook. But we see it. It's an open kitchen. We see it. And that's enough. You know what I mean? You see that and you're like, I did that. It took me 12 hours, but I did that.
Yeah, Bo, that's powerful stuff. I think that's very important. And it's one of the things I don't want to get too in the weeds, but I talk about how the chef-driven restaurant is both one of the greatest things to happen and one of the hugest vulnerabilities to happen to our industry, and for a lot of reasons. On the positive side, the number one thing is exactly what you just said. Open kitchens and the motivation to find out about the people preparing your food created a relationship that we never had in the early days in cooking, when guests were just nameless, faceless assholes that had weird requests and sent back food, right? We didn't understand the
customers.
Yeah, right. Exactly. So I can really appreciate that. All right. I want to get into why you had to leave the industry. And again, we're going to start kind of back again. Stephanie, for you, right? You talked about it's a long journey. I think for people that are leaving right now during COVID, it seems like it happened quickly, yet it's been stirring and brewing under the scenes in us personally or in the industry as a whole for years and years. Absolutely. Burnout is a reality in our industry. For me personally, for so many of us. So why did you have to make the decision, hard, I can tell, decision to leave the restaurant industry?
Yeah, it's such a hard decision because you spend so much time investing your entire life, everything you have into this. So it can be really daunting to think about breaking away from that. But for me, it was kind of twofold. One, I felt like I wanted to do more as a chef. I wanted to do things that I couldn't do inside the kitchen. And I wanted to still work with food, but I wanted to do something that was going to have a bigger impact. I was becoming focused on all of these outside forces that are driving our food industry and, human rights and all of these things that we're really having a reckoning with now. I could see a lot of my frustrations from the restaurant industry and the things that I was experiencing coming from much bigger forces that we couldn't deal with in the kitchen. So there was a draw for me to leave to do something more, to be able to maybe start dealing with some of these things that we've been talking about for a long time, but haven't really been coming to terms with. And then there's this other side where, I was in a managerial role. I was educated in my field. I was incredibly hardworking. So many of us experience this. And you're just struggling, right? You're struggling to survive. You're struggling financially. You're wondering, why am I struggling financially? You're incredibly overworked. You're expected to work hours that you're not paid for. I was at a point where I was just so burnt out that, I was not reaching my output that I should have had. I was struggling creatively. It was like, writer's block, but it was like chef block,
Yeah.
And so I knew that it was at least time for me to take a break. It was at least time for me to step away and say, I think there's something more that I can be doing, and I'm going to give myself the opportunity to step back and see how that feels and go from there, because it's always going to be there, right? Being a chef, being a cook, like you always have that option. It's always there, but I wanted to give myself the opportunity to see what else I could be doing.
And to clarify, you're talking about the potential for food insecurity within our system. You're talking about the social equity of food. Right. You're talking about subsidies and what happens with things like the Farm Bill and our inability to apply proper value to food. And then also just the labor piece of it, right? Because we talk about a lot. We have to invest in our most valuable asset. People is what restaurants are built upon, not the food. Right. The food is the extension of that experience. So I think that's super important. So I can appreciate that, because you're still trying to find any way to bring value to the people working in the industry, bring value to the restaurant scene. You just couldn't do it from working 70 hours a week, not getting paid enough, and having that chef block. So I appreciate that. Matt, for you, kind of this is recent now. I mean, the wounds are fresh still through all of this, and 20 years, that's your life. You spent your entire life. You don't know anything besides restaurants. You can have a 4-hour conversation about saffron, and anybody brings up anything else, you're like, no, saffron. I'll talk to you about saffron all day. So I can feel you on that. So for you, tell us, why did you personally have to leave the industry?
I think it was probably building more than I thought, but I think realistically what it came down to was, most recently, I was laid off obviously in March, and then came back to work in June for 2 days. And I had a trip planned that was going to coincide with our restaurant reopening in June. I had already rescheduled a lot from COVID. This was kind of an important trip. I didn't really want to reschedule it. So I was basically told from my director of operations that with COVID, I needed to dedicate my life to my job. And I needed to be willing to, as the way he put it, our restaurant had a hotel above it. And he said I needed to be willing to sleep in the hotel at night and work every day in order to get the restaurant up and running in this very difficult time, which I understand. I've seen books of restaurants. I've done the accounting. I know what challenges are ahead for these restaurants, and I know exactly how difficult it's going to be. And he wasn't wrong. In order to be successful, they probably do need a chef that's going to be there 80 hours a week right now. And I can't let my life revolve around my job. I would love to find a job that can at least partially revolve around my life and my lifestyle as I want it to be. I think that was it. That was kind of the moment where I realized I'm not willing to dedicate my life to my job anymore. I need something else. I need other things.
You are touching on something that is so important in this conversation. And that is that he wasn't wrong and you weren't wrong. And the contradictory things in motion there are so hard to reconcile with, because you're right, they do need somebody like that. Yet that is not the flaw of that business necessarily in and of itself, or that manager, right? You're put into this system that just spits out shit. It is so hard to sift through all of it to actually make the numbers at the end of the day work. And so what we're really focused on is like, that system is completely broken. And unfortunately, so many of us are working within that system and trying to survive and trying to create a modicum of success. And it's not built for that. It is not fundamentally built for us to succeed in it. And so, it's hard. I have a little bit of animosity towards, say, somebody like the archetype of this manager you're speaking of, or the business you're speaking of. Yet I have so much empathy for the fact that what else can they do? There's nothing else that the system
Exactly.
allows them to do. And so I really appreciate that. Both, one, I can tell you're upset about it, and two, you also know, like, I don't know that if I was on the other side of that, I would have done something different. That's what we need to change. Not the interaction you have with that manager, the fact that that's the only interaction you could have had. And that's really at the crux of this. So I appreciate that. Bo, for you, same thing. It's very fresh right now. You're still kind of in that clumsy transitioning out. I don't know what to do next. Like, what am I doing next? So give us that for you. Why'd you have to leave?
I completely agree with everything Stephanie and Matt said. Again, I do. Like, we've all been there. Really what it kind of comes down to is being treated as a robot is not going to work. We don't have sick days. We don't have mental health days. We don't have vacation days. We don't have fucking healthcare. We don't have anything. Like, if you don't show up for work, you don't have a job. That's it.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I was in a situation in my last gig where long story short, I was brought into the office to talk to the overlord, which is not the chef de cuisine, but, you know, the owner / chef. And he was explaining to me why he fired the PM Sue. I was the AM Sue. He was explaining to me why he needed me to work swings because he fired the PM Sue.
Yep.
Because he found him chugging a beer on a smoke break. Now, the whole time that he's explaining this to me, he's drinking a glass of wine. And I was just like, you know, this is like the most hypocritical shit I think I've ever seen in my life. And I don't know what to tell you other than I have a life and I'm your AM dude. Like, whatever you need in the morning, I got you. And we can talk about swings, but you can't just be like, hey, you work swings now. I'm sorry. It's not how life works. Anyone that works in any other industry, anywhere, has benefits.
Yes.
They have sick days. They
Yes.
have vacation time. They get paid a livable wage, which is my biggest point that I want to talk about. If you can't pay your bills, you can't pay your bills. I mean, it's very simple. If you're working 70, 80 hours a week and you can't afford to pay your cell phone bill, like, what the fuck is that? Like, seriously,
What are we doing here?
Like, there's no point. There's no reason that should be a thing. Okay, so you have this old mentality of if you can't take the heat, get out of the kitchen.
Yeah.
And it's like, that's the old school. And now it's like, you know what? Mental health is kind of a thing. And we're losing all of these famous, fantastic, amazing, life-changing chefs left and right to suicide and overdoses and substance abuse. And it's just like, why? It's pretty apparent, isn't it? I mean, it's hard to keep a relationship with someone that doesn't work in the industry. It's hard to keep a relationship with someone that does work in the industry. It's hard to be happy, you know, like all you do is work. Like, it's even hard to do homework that you even enjoy doing. You know what I mean? Like, 90% of what I watch is like cooking shit. You know what I mean? And it's like, I love it, but at the same time, it's sometimes enough is enough. And I just want to not think about it. And you can never do that once you get to a point that the whole industry is so ass backwards. Like, the higher profile the chef that you work for, the less you get paid.
Yes.
So if you're going to go work for someone that's super, super famous and has a reputation for themselves, you're probably going to do a stage and work for free. You're not even going to get it.
Yeah.
Yep.
You might be lucky to get housing and food, but you're not going to get paid. You're not going to make anything, you know, like, and what are the chances that you're going to walk away from that and then go become the same thing? Almost nil. Like,
Yeah. Right.
What are you supposed to do with that? You know, like you get valuable information and experience and work ethic and all of these wonderful things, but they're never going to do anything for you. They're never going to help you. They're never going to make you make more money. On that same subject, if you go to culinary school, nobody fucking cares.
Oh.
Like you just put yourself in debt for the rest of your life for no reason whatsoever. Because nobody cares. They don't care. Matt, you went to Johnson & Wales just like I did. Nobody cares. And I'll tell you, I don't give a shit that you have a culinary degree.
Sometimes it holds you back.
It does.
I was going to say, I know chefs who won't hire culinary school grads, but I don't know anyone that won't hire someone who just has good experience and has never been to school. Like, that's not a thing.
Bo, I really appreciate that. As you're telling the story of being pulled into that office, all three of us, including Sophie in the background here, who you all can't see, is going, yup. We've all been in exactly that situation. And it's completely crazy. And again, it's like, I understand the plight. I get it. I've been on all sides of the equations, like many of us have, from the ownership to the chef in charge to the dishwasher down. And we are preying on our own passion. We are preying on the ability for us to say, we're going to take less for however long it takes to prove ourselves, to do X, Y, and Z. And the reality is it doesn't pay off. And then there's this generational thing that drives me fucking crazy. Kids these days aren't as passionate. Kids these days don't do what I did. Kids, and it's a couple things to that. Let me tell you. One, getting a plate thrown in your head is not a badge of honor. I thought it was cool. I thought it was what I was supposed to live through. The reality is that's toxic and stupid. And yes, it galvanized us more through the trauma than success side. So we do have that. And I don't demonize those moments because it's filled with so many people that are still a part of my life that I absolutely treasure. And so again, the contradiction is there. Then you go into this, the person that's pointing the fingers and saying that is pissed off, hates their job, doesn't know why they do it themselves, is burnt out themselves, is no longer working the way that they once were passionate about. Yet it's the kid's fault. The kid's pointing the finger at the asshole chef, and nobody is looking at the system that is built, and we're just infighting for no reason. We want the same thing. We actually do. We just have no idea how to get there.
It's funny that you say that, because actually what's happening now is chefs are just poaching cooks from each other. Because what it is nobody can afford to pay their bills and live. So as soon as somebody offers you, well, I'll pay you 75 cents more, I'll pay you $1 more. And let's talk about that. I mean, any other job has a review every 6 months where you either get a raise or you don't. That doesn't happen in the culinary industry. It doesn't happen ever. Like, you might get promoted and get a 50-cent raise, but you could work somewhere for 14 years and end up with 50 cents more. Like, it's so incomparable to anything else that it's like, it's ridiculous. I mean, for what we do, you guys know, I'm preaching to the choir. You know what we do. And it's incredibly difficult to say, like, none of us show up to just do our job and get a paycheck and go home. There's no reason, because we don't make enough money for that. No. We show up because we're passionate and we love it. And now all these people are leaving this industry that are passionate and they love it, but they can't pay their fucking bills. They can't pay their bills. Yeah. And it's just like, well, it's not setting the culinary industry back, but it's stopping progression. It's not moving forward, because all of the brilliant minds that have fallen in love with this, all of the best alchemists in the world have been like, you know what, fuck this. Why should I do this? I could go work at a call center and make enough money to pay my bills. Like, why am I killing myself to achieve nothing?
Yeah. And the industry has not spent any time focused on that why. We're just like, keep cooking this dish until you die, until you stroke out on the line, until you get called in the office for XYZ, until the inevitable other shoe drops. And the reality is the level of anxiety in the kitchen, in the restaurant, is crazy. Not only is there the built-in stress of the business, there's the built-in stress of, can I pay my bills? Built-in stress of somebody else can do this job better. There's so many stress points that are built in. And we see now this play out, which is crazy. Essential worker does not even begin to cover it. Restaurants, this is one of our huge ethos. Restaurants are fundamentally the pillars of both culture and commerce in their communities, because they are the linchpins. We're seeing now that if you want to have a robust culture in any community, restaurants are at the epicenter. If you want to have strong commerce, talk about economic drivers. Number 2 in economic driver in any industry, 2 or 3, depending on the numbers, 15 million, 11 to 15 million people, depending on the numbers. I mean, number 2 employer. And the fact that they can't even pay their bills, yet they're essential, the complete contradiction of that is something that I cannot bear. And clearly the 3 of you cannot bear it either, because as much as it pains all of us, none of us are in a kitchen anymore. And that's like the reality is like, you can't survive that. And that's what we need to reconcile with, not point the fingers in any directions except at the system. So I want to wrap here, but I want to give each of you guys just parting thoughts and go back around. Stephanie, any last thoughts for us on your hope for what happens next in this industry, if you're a part of it or if you're not?
Yes. Gosh, I think COVID-19 has really given a lot of restaurant staff, employees, and owners time to kind of think about a lot of things that are going on, right? This is like our first chance to take a break and be like, wait, what is this? And I think that we've seen this shift happening. And we're seeing, especially right now, due to financial concerns, restaurant owners and employees finally, for the first time, stepping up and advocating for themselves. Because I think you make such a great point that we can't point fingers at each other, because as much as I might be pissed off that a job can't, pay someone more than minimum wage or give them health insurance, those aren't necessarily in the control of a restaurant owner, especially when their budgets are tight. We know what that looks like, and we want to blame them, but it's important to remember that there's a bigger system going on here that is keeping that from happening. And my hope is that restaurant owners continue to advocate for themselves, but they also use their platform, advocate for your staff, show them respect that you care, right? Like, get involved, vote on policy that is going to make healthcare more accessible to your staff, vote on policy that's going to make minimum wage go up. Be involved, because I think when you're just placating and just going along with what's going on, you're not advancing the industry. And I think right now we're just like stalled out, and it's going to take something really big for us to move forward. And so I think, although as terrible as everything has been, I think it's giving people an opportunity to think about how they can be more involved and push things forward. So keep advocating.
A moment to reflect and realize, what the hell have we been doing to ourselves? Right? The definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results. I appreciate too, Stephanie, for you, that you're also taking a long view of the food system and the restaurant system they're in and the people they're in, and saying you're going to try and have an impact in the long term. Even in the short term, it means you lose out on that camaraderie that clearly has fueled you for over a decade. So I appreciate that. And while we're at this, anybody watching this, Sophie, drop saverestaurants.com into the comments right now. Take 20 seconds and make sure that your government representatives know that we need an actual bailout for restaurants, not a loan to put restaurants in more debt to perpetuate the cycle. Because restaurants, that money needs to go to evolving this industry in a completely different way. So we're going to challenge restaurants, if and when this happens, that they don't just go to business as usual. Yet we need to bring money into the system, because that is completely lacking. So thank you for bringing that up. Matt, same thing, kind of last thoughts for you, some hopes that you have kind of moving forward for this industry as a whole.
Yeah, I mean, I think luckily our industry is reckoning with itself and is moving in the right steps. I see a lot of chefs talking about mental health. Yeah. I've been preaching to my chefs and my line cooks and my dishwashers the importance of taking days off when you need them, not killing yourself for this job, demanding good pay. And there are models out there that work. European restaurants seem to hold things down a lot better than we do, with some very simple changes. Their employees work less, get paid more, and are much happier, and on an overall scale. So I think as long as we keep having conversations like this and putting a spotlight on it, and not necessarily just talking about the next, James Beard Award winner, maybe talk about the guy who's offering mental health days and doing stuff like that. I think that does a lot for it. So I think there's a lot of hope, and we have the right people.
2 huge points. One, we can't even get into this, but we talk about in other arenas, the tipping system is a completely arcane system that creates this I hold your destiny in the palm of my hand scenario. That's a huge vulnerability. And I think that's so important for us to think about. And yes, we have hopes that the James Beard becomes best dishwasher, person most likely to pick up a shift, to cover a shift, right? These are the things that I think are super valuable. So thank you for bringing that up. Bo, same for you. Last thoughts. Take us away, my friend.
Hey, man. So Stephanie and Matt both have really good points that I agree with.
You guys all three are on fire. This has been really good. I appreciate it.
They're totally right. And I mean, I was going to kind of say the same thing, but really what it kind of comes down to is if you complain about something, but you don't have a solution, you're just bitching.
Mm-hmm. We're good at that in restaurants.
This is not an easy problem to solve. Right. So essentially what Stephanie kind of mentioned was, it's not fair to blame restaurant owners for really, I mean, essentially what happens is the money that you probably should be paying your cooks is going towards like the light bill and your food cost and shit like that. Yeah. And it's incredibly hard to, once you understand that, it's incredibly hard to be like, point a finger. Yeah. Like it's just like, well, I get it, but there's got to be a way. There's got to be a way. And whether, like Matt mentioned, whether it's tip sharing or whatever it may be, like there has got to be some way that you can actually pay people enough. And none of us are in this industry to get rich. None of us. Like we're here because we love making food. And like I mentioned earlier, we love seeing the look on people's faces when they eat our food. And
that's it. Oh, perfect. Done. Episode over. That's exactly it. Pure hospitality. Bo, Matt, Stephanie, really, really amazing. So grateful for your perspectives, for sharing with us, for being personal and vulnerable in this moment. And it's going to resonate with a lot of people. We have a lot of work to do. And this show especially is going to be about, this series is about highlighting your personal journeys and people resonating with that and feeling like they're not alone in that, having the optionality to potentially leave this industry in the short term. Yet my hope and goal is that all of you come back because we've built an industry that actually is equitable, profitable, and sustainable for the people that matter. That's what we're focused on. That's what you can count on from this series as we go on. Check in with us every Wednesday at 2 p.m. Eastern, noon Mountain. We're going to be back with you and talking about, for the next 4 weeks, people leaving the industry in different capacities from different backgrounds and kind of where we go from here. So thank you all for being on. Thank you all for tuning in. We appreciate you. Cheers.